Hi everyone, my name is Sophie Hunter and I'm a fellow in the Art Conservation Unit of the Museum of New Mexico in Santa Fe. And today this tutorial will review a really nice method to make a storage mount for a ceramic. And there's no one way or one right way to make a storage mount for ceramic. Excuse me. I've seen many museums use different methods. But this is a method that I find to be really great and really useful. I learned it from Ashley McGrew and Thomas Rosenquist at the Southwest Museum of the American Indian, Autry Center of the American West in Los Angeles, California. And virtually their entire ceramic collection of over 10,000 ceramics is mounted in the storage area using this method. So, to begin, the materials that we'll need to make the mount is, well, first of all, the method involves making a pallet and then wedges that are glued to the pallet. So for making the pallet, you can use a variety of different materials depending on the size and the weight of your ceramic. So there's the famous blue board or corrugated archival board. This is one-ply blue board, and usually this is not going to be sufficient for your pallet because it will bend with any kind of pallet. I'm actually using it today just for the purpose of this tutorial. But a double-ply blue board that's doubled up, that's usually okay. And for a ceramic like this that I'm going to be using today, that'll be fine. Your goal is to have a material for a pallet that's going to stay rigid when the ceramic's put on top of it. For larger ceramics that are heavier, there's a polypropylene corrugated board that's also known as Coroplast by a lot of people. And here's an example of the single ply. Again, this might not be rigid enough for your ceramic, but my favorite one to use is this 10 millimeter thick Coroplast that's extremely rigid and can be used for actually very large, very heavy ceramics. So this is a great material. There's one other material I don't have a sample of today that's called Sintra, that's S-I-N-T-R-A, and that's a material that you work more like wood, so you have to cut it on a bandsaw, for instance, but that can be used for really heavy-duty ceramics, and it is archival. So that's what we're going to use to make a pallet today. And then to make our wedges, we're going to use a polyethylene foam plank. People also call it Ethafoam. It's the brand name. And another kind of polyethylene foam called Volara. And Volara comes in a few different thicknesses. The thin one is fine for these purposes, but you can also use the 1/4 inch one. You'll also need a glue gun. And if you have it, it really comes in handy to have a hot air gun too. Okay, so let's get started. First, we want to start with our pallet. Now, we all know that space in museum storage is very valuable because there's none of it ever. So when we measure our pallets, we want to make the smallest possible pallet that's safely possible, basically. And so we can measure our pallet by measuring the diameter of our ceramic and then just add 1/2 inch to each side of that. And I know that seems like such a small amount of space between the edge of the ceramic and the edge of the pallet, but really that's all you need, because if you think about it, if there's a 1/2 inch between the edge of the ceramic and the edge of the pallet, and a bunch of pallets are smashed up against each other in storage, there's going to be a full inch between the edges of each of those ceramics. And that's perfectly fine for keeping the ceramic safe. So once you measure your ceramic out, your pallet, for instance, like this one, we definitely want to cut the tabs. And that's just really good practice for any kind of pallet you make, because when all those pallets are up against one another, that tab will allow a space for you to stick your fingers in and pick it up. So I'll do that. The next thing we're going to do once you have that out is we cut out a little circle to put right in the center of that palette, and that's for the bottom of your ceramic, where that's going to sit. Just to give it a little bit of cushion to absorb any vibrations, for instance. So I just used the top of a jar and a scalpel, and you can just go ahead and cut out that circle. Scalpel's a little dull. Basically like this. And then we just use our glue gun, and we're going to stick that right in the center of our palette, like that. Okay, so now we have our palette with our circle in the center. Now we're going to make the wedge. Now, when we look at the shape of a ceramic, sometimes our intuition for making a wedge is that we need to cut out the shape of the ceramic perfectly. But the problem with doing that is that it's very time consuming to cut out the exact shape of the ceramic, and it hardly ever is a perfect match. So this wedge is so awesome. I call it the super wedge because it has this inverted center, this concave center, and that allows us to make this wedge conform to any surface of any ceramic. And also, because of that concave center, it limits the amount of contact the wedge actually has with the ceramic. And that's great because our goal making storage mounts is to limit the amount of contact the mount actually has with the original object. So to make this wedge, this is how we do it. First, you start with an Ethafoam plank. And you can take a nice knife that make sure it's really sharp, or you can use a blade too. And first you make an incision right down the center that's about 1/2 inch deep. So just like this. Then what we're going to do is we're going to cut it out at a diagonal. So we're going to cut it from the edge of the Ethafoam plank just to the bottom of that incision that we made. So you run the knife down this, and then you do it on the other side. So you have something that looks like this. And then you're going to turn it over. You're going to do the same thing on the other side. By doing it on the other side too, we're going to get 2 wedges with just 1 cut. So that's good. Now, although it's okay for Ethafoam to make direct contact with an object during long-term storage, it is a little bit abrasive. So it's always a good idea to line your Ethafoam with Volara, which is really nice and soft, and it won't abrade your object at all. So a lot of people don't know this, but you can actually fuse Volara to Ethafoam using a hot air tool. And this is really great because it's a more consistent bond, and it's a smoother bond than using a glue gun. If you don't have a hot air tool, you can always just use a glue gun to do this. But I'm going to show you how to do it with a hot air gun. So basically, you're going to start, and as soon as you see the Ethafoam changing slightly, becoming a little bit glossy, that means that it's ready to stick the Volara onto it. So we're just going to go down, sticking the Volara to it. So here you can see the Volara is stuck to it, and it's a really nice bond. And it's easier to do that with 2 people sometimes. So then we can just trim the Volara off around the edges. And And you're going to do it on the other side as well. And we can trim those edges off too. This one's a little sloppy because I'm rushing, but okay, so now we have this foam flake that looks like this with two concave edges. And now we're going to cut our wedges. So the more you do this, the more you'll realize where you need to cut it for, that's determined by the height of your ceramic. For this one, I'm just going to cut it right here because it's pretty small. You just cut a chunk off of it, and then you just cut it across in a diagonal like this. And now we have 2 wedges that we're ready to start. Now, you'll see that when we put our wedge in, you'll see it doesn't conform to the shape of the ceramic completely. So the way we're going to do that is to make a slit down the back of the ceramic. We don't want to go through this Volara, but we're going to make our slit just right under the Volara. So just, oh, it went through, but I'm going to do it on this one. My knife is dull. Just like that. And we're not going to go all the way down to the bottom, but just right before you hit the bottom of it. And then, you know, we all have a lot of Ethaphone scraps around every museum, so you can just use some of those Ethaphone scraps to make just like some little extra wedges. And then the way we do this is you put the wedge up against the ceramic, and then you use those extra Ethaphone wedges. You just insert them into that slit until the wedge conforms perfectly with the ceramic. So that's pretty good right there. Once you have the shape of your wedge, you can just go in and put a little bit of glue in between each one of those. We'll wait for it to dry a little bit. And then that's a pretty funky wedge right there, but you can just go ahead once the glue dries and you just trim all of that off. You can, if it's sticking out of the sides, you can just trim the whole wedge down to the bottom and you'll get a really nice, neat wedge. I think the glue's dry enough. We'll see though. So you can cut that right off. And you can cut it any shape that you think is aesthetically nice. And then what we do is we just put a little bit of glue on the wedge and put it right in there. Now, I just put the glue on the wedge and glued it down with the ceramic here. But if you're worried about glue getting on the ceramic, you can always just place the wedge, remove the ceramic, mark it with a pencil or with blue tape, and then go ahead and glue it down. So there we go. So here's one that I did really quickly before. And it's a really nice mount because it's on a pallet, first of all. So now the ceramic can be taken from the shelf, put on a table. It can be moved around. This can be mounted inside of a box and travel. And the ceramic never really has to be touched. And since the wedges conform so well to the surface of the ceramic, it can be, it's really sturdy on there. So that's our ceramic mount. And if you're interested in learning some more tactics for making storage mounts for other materials, This is a supplement to another presentation that will be given here at ATOM that you can also see. It'll be videotaped. So thank you so much.